This very butcher himself was quite accurately to record in writing, there were more people in this region than in the whole of the Kingdom of Mexico. Yet in this same area, he and his brothers, together with their comrades in arms, were responsible for the deaths of more than 4 or 5 million souls over the 15 or 16 years. See that? Yet in this same area, he and his brothers, together with their comrades in arms, were responsible for the deaths of more than 4 or 5 million souls over the 15 or 16 years. From 1524 to 14, from 1524 to 1540, that they were in the area. Nor is the butchery and destruction over, but those natives who had survived so far will soon perish in the same ways as have all the others in the region. One of this blackguard's boys, whenever he was about to attack a city or the surrounding countryside, was to take with him as many natives as he could from the tribes he had already conquered, and to get them to do his fighting for him. Since he never fed the 10 or 20,000 impressed natives in his army, he gave them leave to eat the prisoners they took. Hear that? Read that again. Since he never fed the 10 or 20,000 impressed natives in his army, he gave them leave to eat the prisoners they took, thus setting a royal seal of approval on the establishment in his camp of a human arbiter, where he himself would preside over the slaughter and grilling of children, and where grown men were butchered for the sake of their hands and feet, which were generally held to be the best cuts. Hear that? Wow. See here? So I say he was just a little displeased, and he helped forward the affliction. You see him grilling the baby, barbecuing the baby, and they got body parts they done cooked, hanging up there. And cannibals, man. Eating people. It says, read it again. Where he himself, the commander, will preside over the slaughter and grilling of children, and where grown men were butchered for the sake of their hands and feet, which were generally held to be the best cuts. They would cut off their hands and feet. They'd be walking around on their ankles and no hands, which were generally held to be the best cuts. As news spread of these atrocities, all the other peoples of the region were paralyzed with fear, as were those elsewhere in the country. Mm-hmm. Let's see. This is on page 68. It says, one Spaniard who wished to satisfy his evil lust on a young girl took out his dagger, or as it may be his sword, and cut off the hand of the girl's mother, who was trying to wrench her from his grasp. When the girl perished in refusing him, he stabbed her to death. Although these people had afforded him every welcome as an honored guest, this commander caused 4,500 of them to be branded as common slaves, even though legally they were all free, as indeed are all the indigenous peoples of the New World. Nor did he make any difference between men and women, taking the branding even the children from 1 to 5 years of age, some of them still unweaned. And he committed other atrocities too many and too dreadful to recount. Okay, the kingdom of Yucatan. It's the next picture. Kingdom of Yucatan. See the woman having her baby on the side, hung her baby on the side, hung herself and her baby on the side, so they wouldn't come and do the things that they would do to the women. One woman determined that the dogs should not tear her to pieces, tied her child to her leg, and hanged herself from a beam. See? Says, if there had been any gold in this province, the Spaniards would have finished off the local population by sending them down mines to dig it out of the earth. As it was, the only way they could realize a profit from the bodies and souls of these poor wretches for whom our Lord died on the cross was to enslave all those whom they had not already murdered. And this they proceeded to do indiscriminately, bartering with the masters of the vessels that came in number to the region once it became known that slaves were to be had in exchange for goods. Natives were sold to buy wine, oil, and vinegar, salt, pork, items of clothing, a horse, or whatever else the butcher and his men imagined they might need. The man would be invited to choose from among 50 or 100 young girls the one he most fancied, and she would then be handed over in exchange for an arroba of wine or oil or vinegar, or for a side of salt pork, right? I gotta deal with that. I could precept this, but I want you to hear the story with what he's saying, but I want to precept some of this. I want to go to Joel, the book of Joel. Remember it says they sold a girl for wine? Most High prophesied this through Joel. Joel 3:3. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot. So they sold a boy to have sex with him. They had them little lads, little boys on them ships and so forth. And not only that, you've seen it in slavery. And here, we're reading about it. Listen. And have given a boy for an harlot, and have sold a girl for wine that they might drink. We just hearing this. We read about this. So you tell me the Bible ain't real. It says, and she would then be handed over, this little girl, in exchange for an araba of wine or oil or vinegar, or for a side of salt pork. 200 or 300 young men would be lined up in similar fashion, the price being much the same. It happened that one young man, the son of a chief, was traded for a cheese. Wow. On another occasion, 100 natives were exchanged for a single horse. This went on for 7 years, from 1526 until 1533. And during that time, the whole region was devastated, and the native population enslaved or massacred without quarter. In 1533, the people of the area were granted a short reprise from this hail, with the Spaniards leaving in response to news that great wealth was to be had in Peru. But it was not long before the commanders were back, and the hellish round of atrocities, robberies, and enslavement was once again in full swing. It still goes on today, and the whole region of 300 leagues, once, as we have said, so full of bustle and life, is now almost entirely abandoned. There is no way the written word can convey the full horror of the atrocities committed throughout this region, nor even if it were so, if it were to, Salakia, would the reader credit the excess that such an account would reveal. I shall accordingly give details of but 2 or 3 incidents. The wretched Spaniards actively pursued the locals, both men and women alike, using wild dogs to track them and hunt them down. One woman who was indisposed at the time and so not able to make good her escape, determined that the dogs should not tear her to pieces as they had done her neighbors, and taking a rope and tying her 1-year-old child to her leg, hanged herself from a beam. Yet she was not in time to prevent the dogs from ripping the infant to pieces, even though a fire did arrive and baptize the infant before it died. Yeah, right. See? Dog still ate the baby up. 1 year old. Wow. When the Spaniards were in the very act of leaving the province, one of them demanded that the son of a local chief go with him. But the boy declined, adamant that he did not want to leave home. The Spaniard resorted. You will come with me, or I will cut off both your ears. When the boy persisted, repeating that he had no wish to leave home, the Spaniard took out his dagger and looped off first one of his ears and then the other. When the boy again insisted that he did not want to go with him, he hacked off his nose, laughing out loud as he did so, as though he were doing no more than pull his hair playfully. This was the same fiend who was later to boast to a vulnerable cleric without any sign of shame or remorse that he always labored long and hard to make the local women pregnant so that they would fetch a higher price as slaves. It was in this kingdom, or in one of the provinces of New Spain, that a Spaniard who was out hunting deer or rabbits realized that his dogs were hungry and, not finding anything they could hunt, took a little boy from his mother, cut his arms and legs into chunks with his knife, and distributed them among his dogs. Read you again. It was in this kingdom, or in one of the provinces of New Spain, that a Spaniard who was out hunting deer or rabbits realized that his dogs were hungry. And not finding anything they could hunt, took a little boy from his mother, cut his arms and legs into chunks with his knife, and distributed them among his dogs. Once they had eaten up these steaks, he threw the rest of the carcass on the ground for them to fight over. These examples should suffice to give some idea of the brutality of the Spanish throughout this territory. Oh, how far God has given them over to a reprobate mind, and of the attitude they take toward a local people created in the Most High's image and redeemed by his blood. Yet, as we shall see, worse was to come. Without dwelling on atrocities too many and too horrible to imagine committed throughout the kingdom by those calling themselves Christians, I should like to close my account with the following incident. As soon as these hellhounds had left, dazzled as they were by the prospect of the riches of Peru, Brother Jacob and 4 fellow members of the Order of St. Francis determined to go to the area to calm the native population, preach to them, and bring to the love of Christ those who had survived a hell that was 7 years of continual Spanish tyranny. They set off, I believe, in 1534, sending on ahead of them a number of natives of the province of Mexico to act as messengers and to ask whether the people would permit the brothers to come among them and to preach their gospel of a single God, the true Lord of creation. The locals took advice and debated long and hard among themselves, asking what kind of men these were who called themselves father and brother. What was it they were after? And in what ways were they different from the Christians who had committed such injustices against them and done them such grievous harm? They finally agreed to let them come among them, provided they came alone and brought no Spaniards with them. The friars undertook to respect these conditions, which had in any case the prior approval of the Viceroy of New Spain, agreeing that only friars would enter the lands in question, that no Spaniard would accompany them, and that there would be no repetition of the atrocities that have been committed by Christians in the recent past. They preached Christ's gospel, in the usual way, and also taught the people about the good and godly intentions of the King of Spain towards them. Man. The local people were so affected by the doctrine and good example of the friars, and so delighted by what they told them of the kings of Spain, for throughout the previous 7 years no one had ever breathed a word in their hearing about there being any king save the governor, who mistreated and slaughtered them. That the mission was only 40 days old when the local chiefs brought all the idols they had previously worshipped and handed them over to the missionaries for burning, as well as entrusting them with the schooling of their children, who are the apples of their eyes. You see, they had all kind of idolatry going on. They built churches and temples and houses for the friars, while invitations poured in from other areas of the country from local people who wished to hear the word of word of God. I'll read it as it said, and to learn more about this great king of Castile. They also did something previously unheard of in the New World. Reports of similar happenings written by those who had tyrannized the local people and destroyed vast swatches of their land in the New World, being nothing but a pack of lies. At the suggestion of the brothers, 12 or 15 local lords, each with dominion over many subjects, and each the owner of large estates, gathered together their people and, with their full approval, voluntarily subjected themselves and them to the Spanish crown, acknowledging the emperor as their supreme lord in his capacity as king of Spain, and appending their marks, as they could not write their names, to a number of documents which I have in my possession, together with the sworn testimony of the missionaries themselves. It was at this point, with these people well on the road to the love of Christ, and the friars joyful in the belief that they would be able to convert all the people of the kingdom, or at least a not inconsiderable number who had survived the slaughter and barbarity of the past several years, that a band of 30 Spaniards erupted onto the scene, 18 of them on horseback and a further 12 on foot. These brigades brought with them bundles of idols they had looted from the people in other parts of the country, and their leader instructed one of those local lords to take the idols and distributed them throughout the territory, the price for which was set at one slave, male or female, and the chief was warned that unless he complied, the Spaniards would attack his people. This threat was enough to frighten the chief into doing what they wanted, and he duly distributed the idols throughout his lands. Remember, the heathen know that we went into captivity for our iniquity, instructing the subjects to worship them and to surrender them, men and women, as Spanish slaves. The people were called into compliance with this sacrilegious traffic. Those families with 2 children handing over one of those with 2. And the local chief in this way satisfied the greed of Spaniards, whom I could not bring myself to dignify with the name of Christians. One of these blasphemous and ungodly bandits, a certain Juan Garcia, being ill and on the point of death, instructed his Armenian slave girl that the 2 sackfuls of idols be kept under his bed, should under no circumstances be bartered, but that, since they were of good quality, she should insist on getting the proper price of 1 slave for each. With this thought on his mind and these words on his lips, he died. Who can doubt but that this wretch is now plunged into the depths of hell? We are now in a position to reflect on just how these Spaniards have improved the life of the peoples of the New World, alerting them to the true faith, teaching by example, and bringing honor to the name of the Lord. We have seen them strive to ensure that He is known to these people and worshiped by them. We have witnessed Spanish concern that the true faith should take root, grow, and blossom among them, and we can judge whether the sins of the Spanish are as less grave than that of Jeroboam, who made Israel to sin when he struck the two golden calves for gods, or whether they are any less grave than that of Judas Iscariot, or their consequences any the less terrible. For time and again the Spaniard in the New World, overcome by their lust for gold, has betrayed the Lord. And time again, he has denied him. The betrayals and the denials coming down to the present day. Once the local people saw that the undertaking given by the missionaries, that they would ensure the Spaniards would be excluded from the territory, had not been honored, and that it was those self-same Spaniards who now brought idols and made them buy them after they had surrendered all their own gods to the friars for burning in return for the promise of one single God they could worship. They were beside themselves, and as one man rose in revolt against the missionaries, asking them, "Why did you lie to us? Why did you trick us with your promise that you would keep the Spanish out of our territory? Why did you burn our gods when you knew they would bring us others from other parts of the country, which we would have to buy? Were not our own gods better than those of other people?" Both the brother friars did the best they could to appease them, but had no real answer to their questions. They did seek out the band of 30 and explained to them the harm they had done, pleading with them to be gone. But the Spaniards refused and even gave the locals to understand that they had come at the express invitation of the missionaries, which was a far-faced lie. The people eventually determined to kill the friars, and they only managed to escape by night after they had been warned of the plan by one or two locals. It was only after they had left that the people realized that they had been innocent all along, and that it was the Spaniards who had lied. They sent messengers over 50 leagues to plead with them to return, begging them to forgive the hostility shown toward them, being true servants of the Most High, or let's say true servants of God, their God, and having the souls of the people at heart. The missionaries agreed. When they returned, they found themselves welcome as angels and remained in the area 4 or 5 months, during all of which time the local people showed kindness on them. Eventually, however, given that the soldiers showed no signs of leaving, that because Yucatan is so far from New Spain, the viceroy proved unable to ship them even by having them publicly declared traitors, and that they continued to maltreat and abuse the local population in their unusual manner. It seemed to the missionaries that sooner or later the people would be provoked beyond measure and might even see the friars as scapegoats, especially as it was proved impossible to preach calmly to a local population that was, like the friars themselves, in a state of continual turmoil provoked by maltreatment at the hands of the Spaniards. They accordingly resolved to abandon their mission, and so the whole region was left without the light and staff of true doctrine, and the local people returned to the darkness and misery in which they had lived previously, deprived at the very moment that they could most have used it, and when they hungered after it, of the sovereign remedy that is the knowledge of the most of God, and left for lack of spiritual substance to wither as do seedings when they are derived of water, and all this was occasioned by the unforgivable behavior and consummation wickedness of the Spaniards. Man, I mean, it's going from place to place, just plundering and slaughtering and murdering us. But you can see why the Most High said, we got some more here. Oh, here you go. Here go another one. It says, the Spaniards seized the king and killed vast members of the men who were with him. This is, let's see where we at. It's the great kingdoms and provinces of Peru. In 1531, another great villain journeyed with a number of men to the kingdom of Peru. Okay? Let's go to where the picture is. It says, I, being an eyewitness to these events, hereby testify that after the great Kati Atahualpa had given them over 2 million in gold, and surrendered all the lands under his jurisdiction without any resistance whatsoever, the Spaniards did, without any provocation whatever on the part of the native people, burn the said Atahualpa, lord of the entire kingdom, and then straight away did burn alive his captain, General Kakushima, who had, with other leading citizens of the kingdom, come in peace to greet the Spanish governor. In the same fashion they did, within the space of a few days, burn another blameless leader, the lord of Quito province, one Champa, without even troubling to produce a pretext for doing so. Equally without cause did they burn Chapara, lord of the Carnary. They burned the feet of Arvis, a great lord from Quito, and tortured him in various other ways to get him to reveal the whereabouts of Atachupa's treasure, of which it would seem he knew nothing. That's what you see. You see here. See here. So I say he was just a little displeased to help forward the affliction. In Quito, the governor of all the provinces of Quito, who had come in peace in response to a request by Sebastian de Benalcazar, commander-in-chief to the governor, was burned alongside many other caciques and leading citizens because the gold he handed over did not match the sum demanded of him. My own belief is that the Spanish plan was to ensure that they did away with all the local lords, bar none, throughout the entire territory. Get rid of all the leaders. I testify that the Spaniards gathered a considerable number of local people and locked up as many of them as they could fit into 3 large buildings, to which they set light, burning to death those inside, even though they had done absolutely nothing whatsoever to merit such treatment. Burn them alive in this building, 3 buildings. On that occasion, a priest, one Alcana, managed to get one lad out of the burning building, but a Spaniard came and took the boy from him and thrust him back into the inferno, where he was burned to a cinder along with all the rest. Later that day, the same Spaniard dropped dead on his way back to camp. And I was of the opinion that he should be refused a Christian burial. He dropped dead. I testify that I saw with my own eyes Spaniards cutting off the hands, noses, and ears of local people, both men and women, simply for the fun of it. And that this happened time and again in various places throughout the region. On several occasions, I also saw them set dogs on the people, many being torn to pieces in this fashion. And they also burned down houses and even whole settlements, too numerous to count. It is also the case that they tore babes and sucklings from their mother's breasts and played games with them, seeing who could throw them the farthest. I was a witness to other outrageous and the hair-raising barbarities, so many and so various that to list each and every one of them individually would be the work of a lifetime. Wow. I can vouch for the truth of the story that they made a practice of summoning catechists and other local leaders, ensuring them of their good will and offering them every assurance of safe conduct, and then seized them as soon as they appeared and burned them. In my presence, they burned 2 such leading citizens, one in Acon and the other in Thames, and there was nothing I could do to stop them, even though I preached against it as effectively as I could. And as God and my conscience are my witness, it was evident to all concerned that it was only because of this maltreatment that the people of Peru were finally provoked into revolt and took up arms against the Spanish, as indeed they had every cause to do, for the Spanish never treated them squarely, never honored any of the undertakings they gave, but rather set about destroying the entire territory for no good reason and without any justification. And eventually the people decided that they would rather die fighting than put up any longer with what was being done to them. I can further testify that local people have told me that there is a great deal more gold still hidden away than they have to date revealed, and that they have refused to hand it over to the Spanish and will continue to refuse to do so for as long as they are unjustly treated in this cruel fashion, preferring indeed to take the secret to the grave, as have so many before them. The way the Spanish have behaved has been an offense to the most to God and a disservice to the crown. The treasury has been defrauded, and in my opinion, it will be a long and a costly business to recover for the crown this territory, which could easily have provided sufficient food to support the entire population of Spain. The kingdom of New Granada, the year 1539, saw a number of adventurers set out from Venezuela, San Marta, and Cartagena from Peru. Others, already in Peru, set off inland to explore further. What they found 300 leagues inland from Santa Marta and Cartagena was a vast fertile tract of beautiful country, home to a teeming population of people every bit as docile and virtuous as the natives of other parts of the New World, and extraordinarily rich both in gold and in those precious stones known as emeralds. This land they dubbed the Kingdom of New Granada, because the first adventurer to clap eyes on it hailed from Granada in Spain. The names of the Spaniards who come from all over to explore this region figure high on the roll of honor of master butchers and experts in spilling of human blood. Those concerned were veterans of some of the earlier bloody campaigns in other parts of the New World, which we have already described. Yet their appalling record in this new kingdom was such as to put all their previous exploits in the shade. They now proceeded to commit outrages of a truly fiendish nature and on a quite unprecedented scale. I should give a short account of only one or two of the numerous crimes perpetrated over the last 3 years, and there is no indication of any let-up in such activity even today. It so happened that their governor, determined to preserve for himself a free hand in plundering and murdering throughout this kingdom, balked attempts made by one of these adventurers to get his hands on a share of the spoils. The individual who found himself thwarted in this fashion reacted by gathering together a number of eyewitnesses and compiling an official report of what was going on. This report listing atrocities, outrageous, and widespread murder was then laid before the Council of the Indies, where a copy of it is still held to this day. The witnesses swear that the whole kingdom was at peace and that the people were happily attending to the Spaniards' every need, continually bringing them things to eat that they had grown for themselves, tilling the soil for them, building houses, and presenting them with gold, the precious stones known as emeralds, and everything else they possessed or could obtain. To realize this long-term purpose of seizing all the valuable gold, the Spaniards employed their usual strategy of apportioning among themselves the towns and their inhabitants,